We are in Calvary Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I did come here to do some filming of some famous graves and things like that, but it was my hopes that when I came to Pittsburgh, I would find at least one absolutely crazy story to tell. And have I ever. We are taking a look today at the story, the unbelievable story of the Biddle Brothers.
We've all heard the phrase, crime of the century. In this case, it was actually true, and at the time, this was considered the crime of the century. So just how did John and Edward Biddle and the Warden's wife, Kate Soffel, end up on a sleigh together, pulled by horses through the snow, with the authorities in pursuit, right after the Biddle brothers had escaped the Allegheny County Jail in Pittsburgh? To get through all the twists and turns that led us to this daring escape and capture, we must first figure out how we even got here to begin with. John and Ed Biddle, whose final resting places we are visiting today at the Calvary Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, were actually born in Canada. They made their way to Pittsburgh and their life of crime began. Around the turn of the century in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were the leaders of a group that would become known as the Chloroform Gang, and for over a year, the brothers would use chloroform to subdue their victims into an unconscious state and proceed to rob them. They were also wanted for murder of a shopkeeper in Mount Washington in Allegheny County. They would be found, tried, and convicted, and were sentenced to hang. While awaiting their sentence to be carried out, they were placed in the Allegheny County Jail. They would be placed here under the watchful eye of Warden Peter Soffel. Warden Soffel not only supervised the running of the jail, he would do his best to try to rehabilitate those there in an effort to make them productive members of society. Now enter into our story, the Warden's wife, Kate Soffel. As I mentioned earlier, Kate Soffel would be a part of the daring escape plan by the Biddle brothers, and on the surface it would appear to be a hostage situation. You see, Kate would get close to the prisoners and would make efforts to help rehabilitate them, so it would have been very easy for one of the prisoners to snatch her and use her in an escape plan. Is that what happened here? Not by a long shot. Kate, during her efforts to rehabilitate Ed Biddle, developed a deep infatuation with him. After a period of behind-the-scenes courtship, Ed had convinced Kate to help him and his brother escape their doomed fate. She became a smuggler for the Biddle brothers, providing them everything from saws to, yes, firearms. The Biddle brothers went to work and would use the saws to work on the bars of their cell. And around 4 a.m. on January 29, 1902, one of the brothers would call a guard, claiming that his brother had fell ill, and when the guard got close enough, John Biddle would grab him and violently throw him over a rail some 16 feet above a stone floor. Ed Biddle would fire on a second guard, wounding him. They would then take the guards and lock them up, steal their clothes, and escape the jail. And who was waiting on them? Kate Soffel, who was well aware of the plan and joined them on their escape. They would take a trolley out of town and walk to a farm roughly a mile away. Here they would steal the sleigh in which they were found and headed towards Butler County. The escape had not been discovered until the shift change took place a couple of hours later, so they had a bit of a head start. Of course, when discovered, it was immediately assumed they were headed back to Canada. So detectives would gather their posse and start following the back roads towards Canada. And yes, they also headed towards Butler County, exactly where the escapees were heading. Detectives and officers were stationed exactly where the Biddle brothers and Kate were heading, and they waited. And the plan worked, and the brothers approached exactly where the authorities thought they would be. The Biddle brothers would slow the sleigh down to see who approached when they came to the realization that they were now surrounded. And of course, they didn't decide to give up and go quietly. Like a cornered animal, they began to fight back. The account of the detectives and the account of the Biddles varied. Detectives would claim that the Biddles opened fire. The Biddles would claim that they were trying to take their own lives to prevent a capture. Both would claim that it went down in different ways, whatever the case may be, and whoever fired. This much is known. Both brothers lay wounded. When the detectives approached the scene, they found Kate Soffel. She had fired upon herself. All three had survived the initial shootout, but all three were wounded badly. They were taken to the Butler County Jail. Once again, while there, John would deny killing the shopkeeper. After the accounts were taken, Ed was left with 3 wounds, and it would be said that John's body was riddled. John would die on February 1st at 7:35 p.m., just a few days after the escape, and Ed would follow on the same day around 11 p.m. The bodies were returned to Pittsburgh and brought right here where we stand today. It was said that they received a hero's welcome as thousands showed up for the viewing, and for whatever reason, they were thought by the crowd to be innocent. A 1983 film about this incident would lead to these headstones being placed. Now let's cover a few things here at the end. I'm sure that you are now wondering what happened to Kate Soffel. We last left her wounded and fighting for life, and not only was she trying to recover from her wounds, she developed pneumonia. Unbelievably, she survived. She was brought back to Pittsburgh, where she confessed to aiding the Biddles, and she would be sentenced to 2 years. She was released after 5 months for good behavior in 1903. Mr. Soffel would be removed as warden, and they would divorce. He moved and lived the rest of his life in Canton, Ohio, with his new wife and his children with ex-wife Kate. He would pass in 1936. Kate would move to the north side of Pittsburgh and would become a dressmaker. She would pass away in 1909 from typhoid fever and is buried in an unmarked grave. As I mentioned earlier in this video, it was a story full of unexpected twists and turns, and a story that I was happy to bring you on my channel. If you enjoy cemetery and history videos, please subscribe to my channel and look for me by searching for Whit Docs on all of your favorite platforms. Once again, from Calvary Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I will see you again soon.